You're listening to the Podcast Engineering Show, session number 14. There they are, my band. Let's do it. Yeah. Here's the... Yes, welcome everyone to the show. I don't know, I'm in a weird little mood. I got Kevin Farkas on the show with me today. He seems like a really cool guy. Welcome everyone to the Podcast Engineering Show. And it's funny, I didn't even pull my intro notes up. This is great. Great start. My wife's about to run the blender and I don't have my notes. Okay, let's do a show. Well, this is great. This show is all about podcast engineering and producing techniques, tips. We talk to experts and people in the field who are actually doing it. You know why I'm doing this show? Because this is becoming an industry here. When I became an audio engineer in the 90s, I went to audio engineering school. And there's no podcast engineering school. Well, wait a minute. There is now because I just started it. I'm actually putting together a course for this fall, the first course for the Podcast Engineering School. It's going to be really awesome. I'm designing that right now. And because there's a lot of businesses that are producing and editing podcasts, and there's also now a lot of positions that are opening up in companies. They're looking for podcast engineers and producers. And how are they going to hire someone if they're not trained properly? So Podcast Engineering School, that's the sponsor of this show, if you will. And I entered podcasting about 4.5 years ago, and I realized that the audio engineering skills of most podcasters are, not that great. And it's okay, because podcasting is a great medium. You do whatever you want, right? There's no rules. We love that. So, but a lot of people do want to sound better. They want to learn more. They want to learn, compression and EQ and mastering and all that stuff. And some more advanced things too. So that's why we exist. And also this show is brought to you by Fractal Recording, which is my production company. I produce podcasts for Forbes, Dun & Bradstreet, and a lot of really cool business authors. Go to fractalrecording.com. So that's who's helped sponsor the show. But if you listen to this show every week, this information will just seep into your brain. You'll become a better audio engineer or podcast engineer, producer, and you'll be able to do your work quicker. And this show is really about the technical side of it. It's not about how to host your show, the right way to talk into a micro. Well, we might talk about that actually. But it's not about the content of podcasts. It's about the recording and editing and mastering. It's about the technical part. So today, I'm really happy to have Kevin Farkas on the show. He is a listener of the show and found us, and we started chatting, and he's doing some really cool things in Pittsburgh. I'll introduce you in a second. But Kevin, welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me on.
All the way from Pittsburgh.
Sunny Pittsburgh, yes.
Sunny. Oh, good for you.
That's right. It's not that smoky city that a lot of older people, at least, remember it as. It's a nice place to live now.
My wife's all upset because today's Monday morning, actually, and the whole weekend was cloudy, and now it's sunny.
Right.
But anyway, this is what happens. You're the founder. Yeah, go ahead.
What is she making in the blender, by the way?
Oh, she makes a fruit smoothie.
Ooh.
Yeah, we get a bunch of fruit. She blends it up, and we, have the smoothie sometime throughout the day. She makes it like every day or every other day. It's really nice, actually. She
Awesome.
puts some cool stuff. She put some protein powder in there. I get this protein powder from the Vitamin Shop. Or I don't know if I should mention them. I just gave them a free plug. Maybe they give me some free protein.
There you go.
Anyway, so you are the founder and executive producer at Veteran Voices of Pittsburgh Oral History Initiative. So what is... Well, you know what? Because I don't like to start shows that way. You all know this. We're going to find out what it is in a second. But you also have launched the Social Voice Podcast Network, which is a nonprofit. You're producing podcasts for small and local-sized businesses in Pittsburgh, right?
Well, in particular, nonprofit organizations, small historical societies, community-oriented groups, things like that. I certainly don't want to step on, folks like yourself who are doing this for a business. So there's this other world out there, with these small nonprofits who, they want to get their message out there, and podcasting, as you know, is a great way to do that. Anyone can do it, really. So that's what the network is really designed to help those really very small, do-it-yourself kind of organizations.
Right. And by the way, there's no stepping on me or stepping on other podcast producers. Trust me, there's enough for all of us. We're in this together. Trust me, there's more business and more people who need help producing podcasts out there than you can shake a stick at. I'm telling you.
Well, actually, the IRS has a requirement for nonprofits, 501c3s such as myself, that we have to sort of design our projects so that we aren't stepping on the toes of commercial organizations and businesses and so forth.
Really?
I don't know if you knew that, but that's why it's I sort of frame this the way I do, and I've sort of defined this this target audience, if you will, population, the way I did, because it is a real thing, and the IRS actually takes that pretty seriously.
Really, I never knew that.
Mm-hmm.
See, my wife and I are about to start our own nonprofit. We provide meetups and retreats with an organization called Pause Your Life. It's pauseyourlife.org. We do meetups and retreats. It's really awesome, and we need to make it a real entity. So we're thinking of a 501c3 or a church. Can't you register as a church? Anyway, we're getting way off topic here. So you're producing podcasts for these nonprofits and smaller organizations. So you have a studio setup, right?
Well, yeah, we have 3 studios, matter of fact, A, B, and C.
Nice.
And I'm in B, and my business partner, Todd, he's also the co-host on one of our podcasts. He is in Studio A. And then our associate producer joins us from Studio C sometimes. And really what that means is I'm in the basement office. Todd's in his attic. This is no kidding. He's in the attic. And Chris and Brian is in his closet.
Oh, nice. Studio C. Studio C is always the small one. Dang it.
That's right. And then we're also on the road. We take our podcasting on the road. We do on-site recording.
Right, you do on-site recording. Hey, tell me, we were talking just before we started. Tell me about when you were recording live and the power went out. Just tell that story real quick if you can.
Oh, yeah. So I record these live breakfast storytelling events, and we had a big event. It was a fabulous sort of thing. 45 minutes into it, Todd, my partner, he's up there, talking to somebody. All of a sudden, the microphones go out. What the heck? Lights didn't go out. Microphones went out. So as it turned out, someone was sitting near the power switch, and their foot hit the breaker on the power strip. Off it went. And so I always record to recorders, and this is the one I have. When the power goes out, if you're in play mode, boom, there goes your file. So I lost everything, 45 minutes of that breakfast.
Just because some woman, her foot hit the little on-off switch on a power strip?
That's right.
Oh, that's not good.
So that's the danger of being plugged in, and you raised a very, very interesting point about using batteries. And we could talk about this probably later, but that's something I never thought about. See, so, your show here, right to this morning, I learned something like, let me consider this. This is a great thing to maybe do, run on battery power.
Totally, yeah. There's so many little nuances. I mean, we're all learning. I learn every day. I learn from every guest on this show. I learn something. And you think learning the small thing is like, oh, that's a little small thing. But no, those small things are what saves your bacon someday.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That those small things are what make the professional, the expert, the guy who people count on. It's all the small things. So yeah, I run my digital recorder. In fact, right now it's my backup recorder. It's a Sony M10. It's a little handheld digital recorder. I like it. Actually, the microphones on it are Omni, so they're nice and clean. But of course, they pick up everything. It's the left and right mics are both Omni, so the stereo spectrum isn't that wide. But because it's Omni and there's less processing done to the actual signal, it sounds very clean, actually. So, in fact, that's how they make cardioid and directional mics, is they actually do a bunch of phase shifting. So they're kind of messing with the signal. So that's why Omni mics are cleaner, to some degree, sometimes to a large degree, but sometimes not. But yeah, I run my digital recorder on batteries. So, of course, I go through batteries, maybe 2 AA batteries a month, maybe not even, because the Sony M10 is really good on batteries. There are some digital recorders that just eat batteries like mad.
Right.
But I don't know, maybe for those, maybe you can have it plugged in and have batteries in it as well as a backup. The other thing is when I do any live events, I always, if there's anything that has batteries, I always put a new battery in it. At the beginning of the event, everything gets new batteries. I mean, Maybe it's not the most economical way to do it, but of course you don't want to mess around when you're live.
Right. I went to rechargeable batteries exclusively a number of years ago. And, there's that upfront cost, of course. But I'm telling you, over time, I've saved so much money just on batteries. And before my events, I make sure the night before everything is charged. I put fresh batteries in, on location. And it seems to work out. But I totally agree with you there.
Nice. So let's get into the speed round. What shows do you produce and engineer yourself? Yeah, so tell me how it works. How do you guys produce shows? Real quick, this is the speed round overview.
How do we produce the shows? Well, our first show is something called Veteran Voices, the podcast. And we've been doing that actually for about 3 years, since 2013. That is our mainstay show, and we are just bringing in some other shows. We actually have 4 that are in the network right now and a few that are lined up.
Okay.
But our shows are basically very simple. We have a guest. Sometimes we are remote, recording through Skype or, maybe Google Voice or something like that. And then sometimes we are actually on location recording.
Okay. So now Veteran Voices, you're one of the hosts?
Yeah, I'm actually the main host.
Okay.
And Todd DiPestino, who is the director of my partner nonprofit organization, joins me on those podcasts when he can. He's an historian extraordinaire, really, and a great conversationalist. And he really brings things to the podcast that I can't, because we're talking with veterans, we're talking about military history and so forth. So that's, Todd's area of expertise. So he joins us when he can, and it's always a great dynamic. Just love those.
Yeah, when there's 2 hosts, it's always... If there's a great chemistry, it really makes a show. It's so much better. Okay, so you're hosting the show. Are you recording? Are you doing all the production yourself? Recording, editing, mastering?
Yeah, I do all the engineering. Yeah, so Todd just basically calls in, just does the hosting, but I do the co-hosting plus all the engineering work. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's say you're ready to do a session. Tell me where you are. Describe your studio. Briefly, we're going to get into all the equipment specifically, but just describe your setup briefly, and then how you actually start the show, and then how you go to editing and mastering, all the way up to publishing.
Yeah. So it's a fairly simple setup. I record to recorder, and not to a computer, and so I run my microphone into my recorder, and then if I'm on Skype or some other sort of call setup, I bring that out of the computer. That goes into a separate track. So I record 2 tracks, my own mic and then the guests. And the way I have it set up, and it's probably not the best way to do it, but if Todd is on, we have another guest, they are both on that Skype line together. So I've got, 2 voices on that second track. And that's always a dicey sort of thing, with the overlap of voices. But so then after that, I just take those tracks and I put them into, my DAW, which I use Audacity.
Okay.
And then I edit those up, and I always, I produce a file for the archives in uncompressed WAV format, and then I will upload a file to Internet Archive, which has our entire audio archive, and then that'll go on to the website. But now we're also with Blueberry, so we're hosted on Blueberry, and we're going that route with iTunes and
nice.
That sort of thing. Yeah, so it's very simple, really.
Nice. So I have a lot of questions. So let's step through everything.
Mm-hmm.
Let's step through the process here. So what kind of mic do you use personally?
Well, I am on Electro Voice RE320.
Ah.
I used to use an SM57. I did that for, really? Up until about 6 months ago.
Wow.
And
hey, well, that's what the president uses, so it's it's not a bad mic.
Oh, you know what? I tell people that all the time. That's my big trivia. You think, oh, hey, there's my microphone right there.
Except he has like 2 or 3 of them always. There's always at least 2. That's what someone told me, and they always have to be wired, never wireless with the president.
That's right. You know why there are 2?
Why are there 2?
It's not for sound quality. It's just for backup.
Oh, okay.
And here's why I know this.
Okay.
I was on a webinar with Shure Microphones, and they do some really neat webinars. And the actual Shure White House liaison was on there, and he's almost like an historian of the whole audio thing with in the White House. And so we went through the whole thing about, which microphones they started to use when they started to record. And, they've been using the 57 really since about 1965, 66.
Wow.
So many, many years. Before that, they used another Shure. But, they used to have 3. If you look up until, I think, Reagan, they had 3 microphones. And now they went to the 2 since Reagan, I think, era, or Bush it was. And they actually went to 2 because the Queen of England was on a podium, and she was so short, but these 3 big microphones just blocked out her view. I'm not kidding. This is what the guy said. So they went to a smaller setup with just the 2 microphones. But it's just for redundancy. That's all. It's not, sound quality. Yeah.
That's interesting. All right, so you use an RE320 mic. Before we really get into things, though, do you have any background in audio? Did you ever take any training? Are you self-taught?
I have an electronics background. I was an avionics technician in the Navy, specifically a communication and navigation guy. But audio recording, no. I am basically self-taught. For the past 6 years or so, I've been doing this.
Okay. Are you a musician as well?
I am a home musician, right? That's basically why I got my first SM57.
See,
just to mic up the guitar,
right?
Yeah, but no, I'm really self-taught, and the school of YouTube, I guess you would say, and many others out there, are producing, great stuff on how to do audio engineering. So I absorb it all. Yeah, so self-taught.
That's great. So as we go through your setup and how you're doing everything, if you have any questions or stumbling blocks, things that you just maybe struggle with, let me, we can talk about it. Maybe I can help. So you have an RE320, and you said, all right, here's the thing. You plug that into your digital recorder directly. What's your digital recorder?
Okay, I use a Zoom F8. It's a field recorder. It's an 8-input, 8-channel field recorder.
Oh.
I use that here. I use it everywhere, actually. And I used to use a Roland R26, which is a 2-channel, and that was fine.
Right.
Because with the podcasting, I mostly do just the 2-channel work. So I run that. But actually, we'll run the 320 through a preamp, which is a PreSonus Tube Pre V2.
Oh.
Which is one of those, this is why I went that route. If you look for preamps for microphones, they're often rack mounted,
Right.
There are very few like portable preamps. They're out there, of course, but not that many that are, 1 portable, 2 affordable, and 3 good.
Right, good quality.
Yeah, so these PreSonus jobs, I have 2 of them. I take them, wherever I go to run these big dynamic mics. They're all those things, right? Just portable, and they just go wherever. It's a nice little tube sound. I like the tube sound a lot. So I run the microphone through the preamp, then into the F8.
Okay, and what's the PreSonus? What's the model number again? You said
it's the PreSonus Tube Pre V2.
V2. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Of course, having a good mic pre is one of the secrets, right? It's not a secret, but I mean, come on. If it just makes that much of a difference, right?
It's the secret sauce.
Really, it really is. All right, so you go into the Zoom F8, and you sort of answered my question. I think I know your answer to my question, because I was wondering if your microphone is going directly into your digital recorder and the computer with your guest on Skype is going directly into your digital recorder, how the heck are you and your guest hearing each other over Skype? Well, how is your guest hearing you over Skype? That's my question.
Yeah, well, this is where I'm sort of primitive in the setup. So I have just a headset, a cheap Logitech headset with a little small boom microphone on it, and that's what I'm conversing with my guest with.
Got it.
Right. So our live conversation is, just a basic computer conversation, but the recording on my end is, my channel's through the microphone, and then their channel, I tap out of the audio out of the computer, and that goes into the second track on the F8.
Right.
And, it is limited, and it doesn't have, the best sound. The sound is as good as Skype or Google Voice will allow.
Right.
And then I do processing with that, and to sort of get it the best I can in the DAW,
right?
Which I said is Audacity.
So one good thing about Skype, which is kind of cool, is that because Skype sort of processes the audio and sort of does some sort of limiting. I don't know if they do any standard type compression or something like that, but I'm sure they do some limiting, and therefore the output of Skype usually has a ceiling, and once you know where that ceiling is, you can set your record level, and you can really feel good that it's not going to go over that ceiling and peak. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, if I am recording someone on Skype, which is kind of rare these days because I'm mostly using this cast platform, I know I can put their level right up to almost all the way up to 0. And I know because it's Skype and it's sort of limited and really, kind of, brick wall limited, it's not going to jump over. The level's not going to jump past a certain point. Do you find that when you record on Skype?
I usually don't have much problem.
Okay.
What with levels, I should say. It's really the sound quality that is always an issue. Whether it just sounds like it's coming over a phone line. Obviously this is through the internet, but it still gets that compression. It gets, the low end and the high end dropped off it just for, that sort of transmission.
Yeah, usually the low end, I always find through Skype is that there's a lot more low end, and I always have to use a filter, a roll-off. Yeah.
Do you put a high-pass filter on? Is that what the effect that you run a high-pass?
Yeah, I low off the roll end. I roll off the low end. Did you hear what I said? Oh, that was awesome. Someone clip that and replay that clip. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Well, actually, I have of course, the RE320s, it's a big mic, and it can be pretty bassy. I don't have one of those voices that has a lot of bass, but I do have an 80 hertz roll-off on the preamp. So that helps a little bit when I start to, do the post-processing. As a starting point, I don't have a lot of bass to work with.
Yeah, I can hear that on your mic. It sounds very clear. I wasn't surprised to hear that it was an RE320. It does sound very clear. And yeah, the low end is there. It's smooth, but it's not too much. I would almost like to hear it with the 80 hertz roll off disengaged. I would almost want to hear that bit. Oh.
Okay, I'm talking to you right now with it off.
Really?
Yeah. How does that sound?
It sounds very similar, actually, but it sounds good. It's hard to tell over headphones for me.
Yeah, it is. So the 80 hertz is off right now, and I'm going to switch it on right now. So here's the 80 hertz cut off right now. So I don't know if you can tell the difference on your end. Sometimes I can really discern these things. Sometimes I can't. I guess, it's sort of like your eye. Your eyes the focus changes on your eyes. And I think it's the same thing with ears, too. That your ears sometimes are better on some days than others. Sometimes, depending on the ambient noise around you, you are keener on picking up certain frequencies or whatever. So I struggle with this all the time, really. Because my big thing is, my philosophy here is always trust your ears, right? Trust your ears. So I like to say, you record with your eyes, you're looking at your level, your meters and so forth. But when it comes to mixing and getting that final output on your audio, it's when you really just have to listen to what's going on and say, that's good. I like that. Or, nah, something's off here, And I think, as you know, that comes with time, right?
Yeah, the ear training is the biggest part of audio. And yeah, I did, now that you turned it back, you turned the roll-off back on, it does sound more clean. And more clear, I think is a good word, because especially with the human voice, I mean, yes, you need, obviously, the low frequencies to make it a full spectrum voice, but that's one of the amateur mistakes in podcasting is that adding too much bass to your voice because you want that big radio voice.
Yes.
It makes it unclear. It's actually hard. It's not as intelligible. So you rolling off at 80 hertz, I actually like it better now that I've heard both and then back to the way you had it, because it is more, it's cleaner. It's clearer. I can hear you more clear. And look, when it comes to the human voice, it's all about the mid-range anyway. You know, the middle frequencies, because that's what's going to come through on every different type of speaker that the listener hears it on. Some people are going to be on the earbuds and they don't have below probably 100 hertz.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's really, I still can't find good earbuds that have good bass because it's just the tiniest speaker. It's not good at producing that bass, right?
Right.
But if you're listening on your stereo system in your living room where you have a subwoofer, you're going to hear a lot of bass in the voice. So it depends where you hear it.
Yeah, that context makes all the difference in the world. It really does. And I think so, as one is engineering and mastering, you have to consider that, right? What is the context of this, this audio product? Where's it going to be listened to? What should I compensate for? You know about the sound wars, right? Obviously, you're a music guy, really, primarily, right? You started
the loudness wars?
The loudness wars, and all that. And, there are a lot of people who say today, correct me, if you think I'm wrong on this, they say like music in the 70s, it's just vinyl. Let me put it that way. Vinyl sounds so much better than modern digital music. I happen to think that music back in the day was engineered differently. It wasn't engineered for loudness. There was a lot of dynamic range, and that's what went on to vinyl, right? I don't necessarily think it's digital per se. I think it's the matter of these levels, right, that are just being overdriven today. As Bobcat says, it's just this crazy. Everything's got to be this wall of sound.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think music was definitely produced differently back then. The equipment was much more analog, but they still had a mastering phase. So before cutting the vinyl, it would go to a mastering engineer, and they would compress it and limit it and EQ it and make sure it was ready to be cut into vinyl. So it wouldn't, if you have too much low end and you cut it into vinyl, it won't work actually. So so that's part of it. The fact that they had the equipment. And the other thing is vinyl actually, from a technical standpoint, does sound better. It has better frequency response than digital. Than standard, 16-bit 44.1 digital quality. Vinyl does have a larger frequency range. So technically, it does sound better. I mean, but of course...
Well, you have some good ears, let me tell you.
Well, that's the thing. Mostly we can't hear it. That's why I said technically it sounds better.
Right.
I mean, I don't know who can hear that. Right. Certainly if you make a digital file that's like, 8-bit crappy digital, like you can hear that, but regular 16-bit 44.1 digital is high enough resolution where it's hard to tell the difference.
Right. Well, it's said that 24-bit resolution actually has a wider frequency response too than 16-bit.
Well, actually no. The bit rate is just the actual depth and resolution of each word. So the way digital works is like, let's say 44,100 samples per second.
Right.
That's what that means. So every second of audio, the computer is taking 44,100 snapshots of this audio, of this electrical signal. That's all it is, right? It's an electrical signal. So it takes 44,100 snapshots, okay? Each snapshot is a word. They call it a word. It's a 16-bit word or a 24-bit word. So each snapshot has a resolution. So a 2-bit word is really small. There's probably only four options. or you know what I mean? Like on, off, on,
right,
off, on, off, off. Mm-hmm. Whatever. But you get to 16-bit, it has a lot more resolution. I don't actually know the resolution of a 16-bit word, but anyhow, the 24-bit word is much higher resolution. So each snapshot, you can think of it as a picture. Each picture that the audio to digital converter takes is much more higher resolution with 24-bit. So the frequency range, the frequency that's captured actually depends on the 44,100. And here's why. Because each wave think of a sound wave. It's a sine wave, really. So it goes up, right? Up above the zero line, and then it goes down below the zero line and comes back to the zero line. You know, that squiggly line. It's a sine wave. So in order to capture, let's say, 100 hertz wave, you actually have to take at least 200 snapshots because you need the up part of the wave and the down part of the wave. Right? So here's the thing. So 44,100 snapshots every second will capture everything up to 22,050 hertz. So half that. Because it needs to capture, the up and the down part of the wave, at least. So that's why they do 44.1, because it captures up to 22,050 hertz, which is pretty much out of the human hearing range, which is good. That's why, in pro audio, they go up to 96K. Right. So that'll capture up to 48,000 hertz, which no human can possibly hear, but there's overtones to the music, which are something that the vinyl can have those overtones. So you don't hear it, but you feel it or you perceive it. It's that weird, it's something we don't know how we perceive it because it's not in our, the ear doesn't hear it, but somehow we perceive it.
Yeah. That's a very real thing in all of this, the psychoacoustics of,
right.
Listening experiences, right? What is it that we perceive? What is it that we feel? It's like trying to describe, what is the timbre of someone's voice? How do you define that? I mean, you know it, you can discern it.
Right.
But how, your voice is very different than mine, but, the timbres, what goes into that? It's very complicated.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Well, we got into the weeds there with
right?
With some of that frequency stuff.
Hey, that's some serious stuff. I love it. All right, so you record onto your Zoom F8, and your Zoom F8, does it has a hard drive in there, or it has a memory card?
Well, it goes to SD card, and so I record on a primary, then I record a backup SD card, 2 slots, and really I have a limiter on that, a 10 dB limiter. And that's pretty much it. I'm recording very flat, so not many settings there on the recorder itself. I do a lot of that business in the post process. Right.
So the 10 dB limiter is in case, like, it can go 10 dB above 0, right, and it'll limit it down and not distort it. Right.
Right. Yeah. If there's a sound spike or something like that, it just knocks that down.
That's so handy. I mean. That's why, because my Sony M10 is the same way. And my big sound or audio interface, the Focusrite 18i20, that's what it is, which has 8 XLR inputs and all these other inputs. But the other day I was recording something, it was touching 0 and it was going over, and I was kind of thinking to myself, hey, it's okay. It has a limiter. It must have some sort of limiter on it. And but I listened back and it was a little crunchy. So I know with my Focusrite 18i20, I mean, you can touch 0, it's fine, but I think if it goes significantly over, it might crunch. But my Sony M10, I think it has 10 or 12 dB of that limiting. So and the Sony M10, you can hit it. You can hit 0 pretty hard and it won't distort. So the good thing about that is, what's the practical use of that to you as a podcast engineer? Well, now you can make sure your levels are strong and healthy. You don't have to be afraid of 0. Right. Now, you shouldn't kill it. You can't just put it to 0 and just kill it. But at the same time, you can't stay down near -12 or -18 just because you want to be safe. No. If you have that limiter, that gives you the ability to go closer to 0 and really capture. So when you the higher your level, the more of that 16-bit or 24-bit word you're utilizing.
Right.
So that's why it's important.
I record with my peak range is around -6 to -12, and in that range, I'm careful not to go into 0 or beyond. So I keep it on that just the lower side of 0.
Yeah, which is good, and you're protected, which is good. All right, so you record it on the Zoom F8, and then you download it onto a computer, I assume.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I download the files to the computer, and then I just create an Audacity project, and then I just start my business on there, which is a whole other process that I've refined as I've been going along here, and I change up too, quite a bit. It depends on my ears, how I am hearing things and how things have been recorded. But I have a sort of a basic framework of effects that I apply. And I can go through those if you like.
Yeah, let's do it. So you bring in the two voices on two different tracks, and I assume you also have a track or two for your intro music and the outro, stuff like that?
Yeah, I have some bumper intros, outro, things like that. And usually about at midpoint, I break, and then I do a pitch for our organization, and then continue on with the interview.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you process the voices in Audacity? What do you use?
Well, so the first thing I do is the first thing I do is amplitude normalize. So I normalize to -3 dB. I give that much headroom. And so then I can see if there's any crazy spikes anywhere, in this file. And if there are, I go in and I either knock them down or take them out, so that it doesn't skew the entire audio, right? So amplitude normalized to -3 dB. And then I run a compressor, usually about 3.5 to 1 ratio. And that starts to bring, the highs down, and so everything looks pretty uniform level-wise.
Right.
And I can kind of, get a sense of what I'm working with the file.
By the way, one of the things that compression does, one of the effects that using compression has on your audio is it brings something closer in your face. So
yes,
you can have a microphone, someone's talking, and you hear it, that's fine. But if you compress it, it'll actually bring it like closer. It just feels like it brings it closer in your face. So that's why sometimes when you have two voices and you're compressing them separately, sometimes people just sound different. Sometimes someone will seem like they're in your face and the other voice will sound further away.
Mm-hmm.
So that way you can actually adjust your compression. The person who sounds further away, you can compress it a little more, bring them closer. Or the person who's too much in your face, maybe you're using a little too much compression. You can sort of mix it in that regard with as far as in your faceness, if that's a word.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, you're right on with that. And I think at the end of the day, your separate voices, your separate tracks should have some sort of parity, at least to the point where it's not distracting, right? As you said, like someone sounds far away, someone's like in your face, someone is very loud, very soft. There should be that sort of parity there on those tracks, so it's a more uniform listening experience.
What'll mess up that whole thing I just said about in your faceness is if one person is talking right on their microphone, if they're like 1 or 2 inches away from their mic, and the other person is back here talking at about a foot or 14 inches, that'll really mess up the compression, because if you take the person that's 14 inches away from their mic and you try to compress them enough to bring it in your face, you'll pick up the whole room. Right.
So. That raises a point that, those of us who are doing the podcast, the engineering and the hosting, whatever, it's really incumbent upon us to sort of give a little bit of instruction to people how to get on that microphone. Uh-huh. Really, I mean, this is, I record a lot of people, and, nobody really has any experience on a microphone.
Right.
Whether this is the oral history work or it's the podcasting, these live events especially, so how people should hold a microphone, if they're holding it at an event, or be squared up with it, how close they should be. So what I started to do actually in this regard is use a mesh pop filter, and I put that thing, in front, and I put that fairly close to somebody, and, people just naturally have a distance from that disc, that mesh disc, and it seems to work out that they will naturally be within that range with that thing is right in front of them, right? So they're squared up on the mic, proper distance, and they stay on that distance throughout the entire podcast. And of course, you always have to sort of check as you go. If someone gets far afield from the, this thing there, you have to, remind them, get them back on mic. But that's a good point.
Right. I actually had a person joined by the phone on one of the shows I was engineering. Someone joined via phone, and they're just talking on the phone like normal, and somehow during the interview, he just, I don't know, like I don't even know if he dropped, like just put the phone like lower, like I don't know. He just stopped talking into the phone. He wasn't on speakerphone, but he on your phone, you can talk right into the phone, right? We all know what that means. And then you can also kind of like, you can have the phone to your ear, but the microphone part is like down near your neck or even to your side, right? So your mouth is much further from the mic. And this person started, they just put, I don't know, they weren't talking into the phone, and they started talking real soft, and it was like, wow, it just made it just makes it noisy when you go process it later, because the signal to noise ratio is way skewed from what they should be doing, just talking into a phone. And I thought that was something like, if you can have a guest and be sure that they know how to talk into this microphone, it's a phone. They use it every day. You think they're going to talk into it. But even there, sometimes the guests will throw you a curveball and just, not talk into their phone. It's weird.
Right.
It's crazy.
Well, I think fundamentally it starts right there at the microphone, right? So, getting that good placement, that makes all the difference. We've had people in our live events, I mean, they're holding a microphone and it's flipping around like a lightsaber, in front of their faces. And we've had people hold the microphone like parallel to their face, but like against their nose. Oh. I mean, it's the most bizarre thing, but they're not audio people, right? They're not broadcasters, so a little bit of instruction usually helps with that.
Right. So what resolution do you record at on your F8?
Well, always 48 sampling rate and 24-bit.
Oh,
always.
Sweet. Yeah, that's awesome.
And I always record to wave, the uncompressed.
Yeah.
Because our stuff is always kept for archival purposes. And I actually do upload to Internet Archive the WAV file. Then I go to MP3 when I have to, such as, uploading to Blueberry.
Right.
Right. Well, there is a limit there, but I work almost always in, uncompressed and 48/24.
Okay. So before we get to Internet Archive, because I kind of know what that is, but I don't know. But when you're in Audacity and you're editing and you're compressing and you're making it right, do you do, just real quick, do you do like a lot of editing? Do you take out are you crazy with editing, or do you just kind of make it sound okay?
Yeah, I'd say I'm a bit crazy with it. I used to be a lot crazier, really. And, a lot of your guests have expressed the same sentiment. They started off really, really detail-oriented and so forth, and have backed off over time. And, I have the same sort of story, every and tightening up every gap so it's uniform. And that's the kind of crazy stuff I did when I first started this. But, I'm not nearly as obsessed with that stuff now. So I do take out the distractions, and there are those things. Someone coughs and whatever, you take out that obvious stuff.
Right.
Because I want my listener to have a natural sounding experience. It should be pleasant.
Right.
Right. And there should be continuity and uniformity there. So taking out just enough of the ahs and ums and tightening things up, whatever, just lends to that. So that's what I do. But if I could go back to the effects chain here just a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
So after the compressor, I would usually run a noise reduction effect, which is really a gate. And I'll take out, I sense each track separately, and then I'll do a little noise reduction on those tracks.
Now, is that a noise reduction or a gate? Because they are two different things.
Well, in Audacity, the noise reduction there effect essentially works as a gate.
Right. So what? Yeah. Well, it may seem like it works as a gate, but it is definitely working different. So the noise reduction is going to scan any hums or any room noise or any fans in the background, and it'll scan it during the quiet parts of a person when a person's not speaking, and it'll scan that and it'll remove that. And that's how it. So when you're playing it back and someone is not speaking, their track sounds much quieter. That fan in the background is either gone or much, much lower. So it kind of sounds like a gate, because that's what a gate does too. It'll take the quiet parts and push them down further. Mm-hmm. But it does it in a different way. And I would say noise reduction is safer. Meaning, a gate is touchy. You got to set the threshold right, because the thing a gate can do is it can cut off people's words or the end of their word, or it can cut off the beginning of their breath.
Right.
Because it doesn't engage until it goes above a certain level, so that you can get these half breaths,
Right.
Like,
and that's that you're so right about that, and that's one of the reasons why I do rely on this the standard effect there in Audacity. It is a softer touch. It really does what I want it to do. I don't have to worry so much about things being cut off at the end, like a hard gate would do. So it really works for me.
Nice.
And with all the effects I apply, I should say that I start from way out and I work closer into more of them. In other words, I just apply the minimal amount of effects that I can get away with. It's sort of just a philosophy I have, and I've worked on stuff, and you probably have too. You're just applying effect after effect, and at some point you listen to your audio and you say, "Wow, where did I go off the rails on this?"
Yeah.
And then you just sort of back off. I've worked hours on things, and I just said, "This is it. I can't take this." So I go back to the beginning, start all over again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the beauty of adding a little. And then, of course, you can add too much. You can go the other way too. I mean, as you're figuring out how much of this effect to add, you can start with a little and listen and hear it. Then you go the other extreme. You add way too much, and you hear it and you go, "Oh my God, that's I know that's too much." And then you bring it down slowly to where it sounds good. And then, in my experience, I always end up turning it down even more, a little more. So start with extreme. Turn the effect down until, that sounds good. That's probably enough. And then, in reality, that's still probably too much. So I turn it down just a little more. Yeah, that's another way to get the level too of an effect.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, I mean, this is one of the reasons that I don't rely on in-recording processing. Like the hardware,
right?
The gates and so for compressors. Because, when you bake that stuff in, it's there. And, many of your guests have expressed the same thing. And, many of them successfully use, compressors as they record and so forth. And I say, hey, if that works for you, great. I just don't want to trust that, because if you bake it in my line of work, we often don't get a second chance to reach out to people that we record. And so I like to just play it safer. And just record it flat and clean, and then work on it in post.
That is a good philosophy. All right, so you use the noise reduction. Do you use any other effects?
Yeah, I may apply a de-esser if there's an issue. With sort of sibilance. Yeah, yeah. And then so when I have this audio that sounds pretty decent to my ears, then I'll get into the ducking on the channels, because often I'm recording in close proximity, and so we've got mic crossover and so forth. So I'll do the ducking, and after that, then I do the EQ'ing.
Wait, ducking means you're riding the level of each track. So when someone's not talking, you ride their level down.
Right. And what I have been doing mostly is not flatlining the track that's, the non-spoken portion of the track.
Right.
But I reduce it maybe negative 16 dB or so in there.
Right.
So there's a little bit of the opposite mic coming through. And I find that lends to a little bit of almost a reverb effect. So there's a little bit more air in there, as opposed to like someone's talking and then, there's this absolute silence. And because you get into that when you cross those voices, that's when you run into trouble. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is a big problem. If when one person is not speaking, if you pretty much delete that audio or bring it down to zero, and then if both people start talking at the same time, then you hear this room. It sounds like they're in a stadium compared to the other parts. It's very touchy to figure that out. So I like the way you're doing it. You're bringing it down, but not all the way, because that makes the transitions in and out smoother.
Right. And if I don't do a heavy noise reduction, there still is some ambient noise that's on both tracks, because they're in the same room often.
Right.
You get that ambient noise that sort of works when there is a pause in the talking and so forth.
Right.
So then after the ducking, it's the EQ process, and I sort of have I have some presets for my voice and the microphones that I use. But I really, again, again, I try, to listen to what's going on here, and I don't immediately jump to a preset. I just kind of, I think, what do I need to do on this voice? Is it too bassy? Whatever. But basically, my recipe is I will bring down the low end a little bit more, starting at 400 hertz. I'll slope that down and to about 100. It's a gentle slope, and around 100 hertz, I drop it down even further, about 3 dB. So if that makes sense. So it's a 3 dB drop on the low end that sort of ramps up to about 400 hertz. Okay? And then around 2K, 3K, with those formant frequencies for the human voice, I pop those up a little bit. I boost those maybe about 2 or 3 decibels in that range. And that gives that little punch to the voice, those because those formant frequencies, that's where intelligibility is. So I just, it's a higher mid-range, so I bring those up just a little bit. Sometimes I don't have to, but that's sort of just something I check,
right?
On my list. And then I'll drop off the high end about 15K. I'll just totally cut that off. Yeah. And here's a question for you around EQing. Some mics are, the RE320, for example, very crisp, and sometimes it's too crisp. How do you deal with that in the EQ process? Is there a way? Is there certain frequencies that really address that? I don't know. I keep experimenting.
Yeah. Well, one thing is obviously your ear. You could sit there and hear it. Where is it too crisp? Is it the 2 or 3K? Is it the 5 or 6K? Is it the 10 to 12K? So in my mind, after all these years, I have all these different areas of the frequency band, and they all mean different things to me. And so I know if I hear a mic that's a little too crisp or a little too present or something, I can usually tell just in general where it is. Is it 2 or 3K? Is it 5 or 6? Is it 10 or 12? So that's one thing you'll learn over time. But yeah, so you can. There's a trick you can use in EQ. It's when you have a parametric EQ and you turn the Q level to really narrow. And so when you're EQing plus or minus, you're only affecting a very narrow frequency band. And so what you do is you put it to narrow. So let's say it's 2 or 3K. So put it on 2500 hertz, let's say. Put the Q really narrow and actually crank the gain up to like plus 15 or plus 18. Like just crank the gain unbelievably. And you'll be able to hear what 2500 sounds like, and you'll know, is that the frequency that's annoying me? And what you can do is you can go back and forth so you can be on 2500, but you can bring that up to 3500, bring it up to 5K. You can actually scrub each way. You can find that frequency that is maybe too crisp, or maybe annoying you, or maybe hurting your ear. And then once you find the frequency, then you can put the Q on a more normal setting, more like a middle of the road setting, not super narrow. And then you bring your gain back to 0. You bring everything back to 0, and now you know what frequency it is. So let's say it's 4,000. Let's say it's 4K that's hurting your ear, which, by the way, 4K is pretty much right around there is the frequency that hurts your ear. It's like a painful. So you can take 4K, and then you just start backing down a little on the 4K. And then, you can change your Q if you want, but you know that the frequency is 4K, and then you just adjust it. You can do the same thing in the low mid, which is around 400 or 420 or 440, somewhere around there. That's the mud.
Right.
That's where the mud is. So you can literally do the same thing. Put the Q really, really tight, and jack the gain like plus 20, and you can hear around 400. Go to 400. Hear what that sounds like. Muddy. Okay, go to 440. Not as much mud. Go down to 350. Well, no, that's not it. So you go up and you find that let's say it's 400. That's mud. And so then you zero everything out, and then you just, at 400, just back off on 400 a little. And when you back off on 400, man, it makes the voice much clearer. It really does. But you can't take too much out at 400, because everything's a balance, right? You can't it has to just be balanced. But if you need a little more clarity, you can look around 400. Sometimes the low frequency too. That's why I use the roll off at the low frequency. You could just roll off like up to 60 hertz or 80 hertz or something. Sometimes less. Sometimes 50. Sometimes doing a roll off at 50 hertz just makes the voice a little more clear, a little less rumbly, and so that's a good trick to make the Q really narrow and just go find that frequency.
See, this is the kind of stuff that will probably drive me to another DAW in the future.
I thought you were going to say it was going to drive you to madness.
Well, that too. That too. Yeah, you're probably the same way. We obsess over this stuff and what's going on here? What is going on here? Trying to figure this out. But Audacity is the tools aren't that complicated or complex. So I think in the future having the ability to work with a parametric EQ and stuff like that, I think that's where I'm going to go.
Well, you can with Audacity, you can get plugins. You can buy great plugins.
Yeah. There are those, and
you can get the best EQ on the planet. Use it in Audacity. I'm sure you could. Yeah, just go buy a plugin. I don't know what plugins to buy for Audacity.
There are a lot of free ones out there too to download, but you get what you pay for, right?
Yeah. So one of the plugins that I really like are actually it comes with the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 audio interface. It actually comes with a bundle of the Focusrite Red plugins. There's a Red compressor and a Red EQ. And the Focusrite Red is a super high-end audio gear equipment. Like they used to make Red 1 through 7 or 1 through 8, I think. I used to have a Red, I forget which one. It was a mic pre and a compressor. But it cost me, I think, $4,000. It was a 2-rack space unit. This is back a long time ago. It cost me probably about $4,000. But just one mic pre and one compressor. That's all it was. You can only run one signal through it at a time. Wow. $4,000. Well, guess what? This thing was amazing. Like, stupid awesome. So the Red plugins that come with the Scarlett are really handy. It's an EQ and a compressor, and they're really good. It's just on another level of quality than the free stuff you get within Audacity or anything free that you can download. And there's a lot of that. You can find, look, all you need is a good EQ. Like the Red EQ, I use that. That's my EQ. I use it on everything. Why? Because it's way better quality than anything else I could find. Mm. So once you can buy one EQ, even if it costs you $100, $200, whatever. You have one great EQ. You can use that on everything, and my God, over time, $100 is nothing. $200, please.
Yeah.
So
this we're talking about really ramping up the quality of things with some of this gear, and I love the discussions that you've had on your podcast so far with people who they talk about what they use, how they used to use Audacity, they moved on, or some people say, I just still love Audacity, right, and that sort of thing. It's really about, at the end of the day, are you getting the quality that you want, out of your sound? And, this is why it matters to me, obsessing over these things. In our line of work here, we work with a lot of elderly folks, World War II veterans. Mm. And, my God, so many of them. And, a lot of these veterans are telling their stories for their families. So if we have the ability to record their stories, their voices in the highest fidelity, the highest quality we can, why wouldn't we, Right. And here's why this really matters. I don't want to bum you out here, but maybe I won't. I don't know. A few years back, my mom passed away. And before she did, the year preceding, she was ill, and we knew what was coming. And so I sat her down, and I put her on, some good microphones. I think I was using some MXL V67s, and I had her just, tell me about her life, her childhood, and so forth. Nice recording. Mm. When I listen to her recording now and close my eyes, it's as though my mother is standing right next to me. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience, right? So personally, I like to give the people that we record that same sort of experience, if nothing else for their families, that they would have a voice recorded that sounds just like Grandpa, sounds just like, Uncle Joe, because that really matters. Now, to me, it's just a crime to have, a recording of Grandpa that sounds like it's coming through a tin can, right?
Right.
It would be it's unconscionable to me as a sound person to do that for somebody. So that's why I obsess over this.
That's really important. Really important. In fact, I was working with a guy in New Jersey he's a internet radio DJ, and he wanted to do something similar. I forget what he was calling them, but it was like where you sit down a family and record at length for posterity. And it doesn't have to be an old person either. Maybe it's the grandparents, the parents, and the kids all sit together. So I don't know, but it's interesting. And like almost like a picture album, or you would sell a service and say, hey, bring your whole family. We'll take a nice family portrait, right? Well, what about it's like an audio family portrait? It could be.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what? That's actually how I got into this business. I had that business plan in mind, and I learned very quickly that it's not like photography where there's a quid pro quo. There's here's $200. Here's your portrait, right? When it comes to paying for an audio recording, it's just not there,
right?
As a business strategy. I mean, in my experience, anyways. There are probably some people doing it. There's actually a whole group of people called personal historians. There's an organization of them. Oh, and they do this, and it's it could be $15,000 for a project. I mean, it's very costly, and we work with the Heinz History Center here in Pittsburgh, and they had told us that they had tried to do oral history work, just like we're talking about. You have to sort of put a lot into this, and it just priced people out. I mean, people can't afford to pay what it really costs to do this work,
right?
So.
Really, really. So this has been just great. I really thank you, Kevin, for coming on the show. This could be my favorite episode so far. I think we got to go into some detail here. I got to actually explain some audio stuff, which is helpful to people, and it's because you are interested in it. You have a passion for it, and I really think it's wonderful that you're not from an audio background per se, but you really want to do it right because you want to serve the people you're serving better. So to me, that's just awesome. I'm really happy you could be on the show. Thanks, man.
Well, hey, and thank you, Chris, for all that you do.
Love it, love it. So your show is called Veteran Voices. What's the website for that?
It's veteranvoicesofpittsburgh.com.
There you go.
Right.
And it's also your nonprofit. And you also have the Social Voice Podcast Network. What's the website for that?
Well, it's it's attached to everything. But the URL is veteranvoicesofpittsburgh.com. When you go to that page, you will see the podcast cover art right on the front there, and click on that, and you can check out our current episodes and all of the things that we're developing, for the network there.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, Kevin, like I said, I'm really happy you're becoming a podcast engineer, producer extraordinaire. You have what it takes. You're asking the right questions. You're getting the experience. So,
hey, where's Barry?
Oh, I forgot Barry this episode.
Oh, dude, you've got to work him in there somewhere. I just love Barry.
Oh man. So, Kevin, do you have any questions for Barry?
Okay, yeah, you're turning that on me now, because I know every episode you say it's so hard to come up with these questions.
Oh yeah. Here, wait. Let me turn to my other Barry sound bank. I normally use a few on the show, but now there's a lot more. What the heck is this?
Well, I've got a question for Barry.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey Barry, Chris. Is he a good sound engineer?
Oh, forget it. Yeah, oh yeah.
There you go.
I love it.
It's so funny.
I love it.
It's so much easier to use Barry clips when I'm making fun of my friend Ralph Rivera. I don't know why. It's like, hey Barry, do you think Ralph Rivera you think his podcast is ever going to become popular?
Nah, it ain't gonna happen.
I mean, it's so easy when you're making fun of somebody, but anyway. And thank you for listening. Again, Podcast Engineering School. We'll start having courses this fall. It should be great. I can't wait to get everybody in a room with EQs and compressors and start twisting knobs and learning all this stuff. So, again, until next week, we'll be back with another episode. But until then, you know what to do. You could say it yourself. Go ahead, say it. Say it. All right, I'll say it. Sound great.